Thank you all so much for joining. I'm sure more people will be joining in the next few minutes, but Rukmini, should we go ahead and get started?
Sure, of course. Thank you
Okay,
for joining.
so this is a I say this every single month. I'm like, this month is the most special Urban Davy, but I genuinely feel that every single month. So this month's September edition Urban Davy is the most special Urban Davy. We have a dear, dear friend of all of ours. I know personally I consider her my older, more wise, more advanced, sweet, loving sister who I met I think I met you in 2014. Something like that. Anyways, many years back. And has just been, yeah, the most loving friend and sister one could ever imagine, and just the most intelligent, wise, incredible personality that every single time I have a conversation with her, listen to her, I feel enlightened and I feel grateful for her association. And she's actually been practicing bhakti for over 20 years, even though she's so young, and has completely dedicated her life to the practice. Over the last 2 decades, she's lived more than 10 years in ashrams or temples and has served as a personal assistant to her spiritual master or guru, spiritual teacher, Ravinder Swarup Das. She also earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science and Religious Studies from University of Oregon, as well as a Master of Theology degree from Harvard Divinity School, where she focused on South Asian theology and Sanskrit. She currently works as a tutor and continues to live and serve her spiritual teacher, her spiritual master within a small devotee community in Stuyvesant Falls, New York. So we're super grateful to have her here today and really look forward to her sharing our wisdom with us in this interactive session. Shraddha, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Champak. That was a very warm welcome, and I send that love back to you. Ever since I've met you, you've been a dear, dear friend, and so many people here as well on this call. So thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm humbled to be in your company and just grateful to finally join the Urban Devi group. Many of you here are actually much more advanced than me, so I say this with all sincerity. I ask for your blessings, and I ask for the blessings of my teachers that today I can say something that is beneficial. They say that the best way to learn is to teach, and I'm definitely here as a student, even though I might be speaking today. The topic for today's discussion is the guru and disciple relationship, and how to manifest it in a very personal way, how it becomes a very personal relationship. But before I get going, I'd like just to do a little light housekeeping. There's going to be a couple instances where I'll ask for some volunteers to read, 4 different instances actually, just to make it a little bit more interactive so you get a little break from my voice. 3 instances will be a little bit earlier on and 1 will be a little later. These are excerpts from Krishna book and Bhagavad Gita. There's not a lot of Sanskrit, I promise. So each excerpt is about 1 paragraph. So if we could have a few volunteers at those times to read, that would be really great. So I'd like to begin with this story about Krishna and Balaram. After Krishna and Balaram killed the evil king Kamsa and they rescued from prison their parents, Devaki and Vasudev, they took part in a sacred thread ceremony and they accepted vows as student monks or brahmacharis. And at this time, the desire to study the Vedas arose within their hearts. After much consideration, they decided to take shelter of a guru named Sandipani Muni, who lived in Avantipur. Now, this is near, some of you may have heard of the city named Ujjain in India. Because Krishna and Balaram had taken vows as brahmacharis, that meant that they couldn't, hop a ride to Avantipur, but they actually had to walk the whole way there and was many miles away. And once they arrived, they offered firewood to Sandipani Muni as a gift. And they bowed down and expressed their desire to learn from him. Krishna and Balaram said to Sandipani Muni, "O descendant of a various glorious family, O crest jewel of the Brahmanas, O treasure house of knowledge, O wise saint who knows the heart of Vedic Dharma, O rescuer who drives away the sorrow that is ignorance, O friend of the poor and the wretched, please rescue us. We take shelter at your feet." The Guru Sandipani Muni then said to Krishna and Balaram, "Time is very precious to us. Still, considering the situation, you two saintly persons should stay here with us." So he's accepting them as students. "You should give alms to me and accept instruction for me, for I have been properly taught. And you should put an end to your kshatriya pride, your warrior pride." So acting like ordinary souls, Krishna and Balaram engaged in all of the normal activities as students of the ashram. They begged for alms, as their guru had asked. They performed menial service, and they attended classes. And one day, seeing that there might be an unseasonable rainfall and worrying about firewood for the next day, Sandipani Muni's wife said to some of the boys in the ashram, "Oh, my sons, from where will I get firewood?" And hearing this, the boys became frightened because they saw the storm approaching. The boys recounted the request to Krishna and Balaram, and when they heard it, they very devotedly set out to gather the very best firewood from a remote place in the forest. And seeing Krishna and Balaram set out in this way, some of the other boys, including their dear friend Sudama, eagerly followed them. So we're setting the scene. The storm is approaching. There's this need for firewood, and Krishna and Balaram, along with some of the other boys, go to collect the firewood. And now I'm going to share my screen because I would like a few of us to help read what happens next. And would one person like to volunteer to read this paragraph? And I'm going to set it up briefly as somebody thinks about volunteering. So to set the scene, many years later, Krishna and his friend Sudama met again, and they began to recall their time in the Gurukula. Okay. As we read through this excerpt from Krishna book, it's Krishna speaking to Sudama, and there were a lot of instructions about the guru-disciple relationship that come in this story. And I'd like you to pay very close attention to what those are. We'll be unpacking them as we move along. So would one person like to volunteer to read this first paragraph? And then there's going to be 2 other paragraphs, so I need some other volunteers lined up as well. Go ahead, Andrea, please. Thank you.
Krishna said, "My dear Sudama, I think you remember our activities during the days when we were living as students. You may remember that once we went to collect fuel from the forest on the order of the Guru's wife. While collecting the dried wood, we entered the dense forest and by chance became lost. There was an unexpected dust storm, and then clouds and lightning in the sky, and the explosive sound of thunder. Then sunset came, and we were lost in the dark jungle. After this, there was severe rainfall. The whole ground was overflooded with water, and we could not trace out the way to return to our Guru's ashram. You may remember that heavy rainfall. It was not actually rainfall, but a sort of devastation. On account of the dust storm and the heavy rain, we began to feel greatly pained, and in whichever direction we turned, we were bewildered. In that distressed condition, we took each other's hand and tried to find our way out. We passed the whole night in that way, and early in the morning, when our absence became known to our Gurudev, he sent his other disciples to search us out. He also came with them, and when they reached us in the jungle, they found us very much distressed.
Okay, so there's this torrential storm, the boys get lost, and when they do not return to the ashrama by the next day, Sandipani Muni sends some boys, and he himself goes out to search for Krishna and the other boys that had been lost. And now I'd like the next person, if somebody else would like to read this next paragraph. This next paragraph is going to be Sandipani Muni's, the Guru's reaction when they find the boys that had been lost. Who else would like to read?
I can read.
Please go ahead.
With great compassion, our Gurudev said, "My dear boys, it is very wonderful that you have suffered so much trouble for me. Everyone likes to take care of his body as the first consideration, but you are so good and faithful to your Guru that without caring for bodily comforts, you have taken so much trouble for me. I am glad to see that bona fide students like you will undergo any kind of trouble for the satisfaction of the spiritual master. That is the way for a bona fide disciple to become free from his debt to the spiritual master. It is the duty of the disciple to dedicate his life to the service of the spiritual master. My dear best of the twice born, I am greatly pleased by your acts, and I bless you. May all your desires and ambitions be fulfilled. May the understanding of the Vedas, which you have learned from me, always continue to remain within your memory, so that at every moment you can remember the teachings of the Vedas and quote their instructions without difficulty. Thus, you will never be disappointed in this life or the next."
Thank you so much. And as we can see here, Sandipani Muni is recognizing this selfless service of Krishna and the other boys. And he's reciprocating with blessings here. And next, in this next paragraph, and again, just one more reader for this short paragraph, Krishna will encapsulate the instructions to Sudama. He's going to emphasize what the instructions were in this experience. So if a third person could read that, please. I can read. Please go ahead.
Krishna continued, "My dear friend, you may remember that many such incidents occurred while we were in the ashram of our spiritual master. Both of us can realize that without the blessings of the spiritual master, no one can be happy. By the mercy of the spiritual master and by his blessings, one can achieve peace and prosperity and be able to fulfill the mission of human life."
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the readers. That was really helpful. As you can see, there's a lot to unpack here in just this short excerpt. We're going to take some time to do that. So just to get an overview analysis of this story, there's the overview of the sequence of what has happened. So Krishna and Balaram, they decide to take shelter of a guru, but they don't just jump to anybody who's around. They actually consider it for some time of who they're going to take shelter of. And they took the time to find a qualified spiritual master. They then approached that spiritual master in a very humble mood. They brought a simple gift of firewood. There's a theme of firewood here. The Brahmanas use a lot of firewood. So they bring this firewood and they then glorify Sandipani Muni, which indicated his qualifications and why they wanted to learn from him. They then bowed down in humble submission and they asked to be his students. They didn't assume like, oh yeah, you're going to be my teacher. They actually asked for that. Once Sandipani Muni accepted them as students, they followed his instructions. They collected alms for him. And they engaged in very menial service like cooking and cleaning and the other activities in the ashram. And they inquired submissively. They were willing to undergo hardship or in sacrifice for the sake of serving the spiritual master. And as Krishna mentioned, the story that we just read of them collecting the firewood in the storm was one of many such incidents of hardship while at their guru's ashram, or sacrifice in their guru's ashram. Okay, so that's just kind of the overview of what we've read. What was the result of that? The result of that was they received the blessings from Sandipani Muni. They received their guru's blessings. Again, Sandipani Muni said, everyone likes to take care of his body as the first consideration. But you are so good and faithful to your guru that without caring for bodily comforts, you have taken so much trouble for me. So there's this recognition of what the students have done. He continues, I'm greatly pleased by your acts and I bless you. The blessing is, may all your desires and ambitions be fulfilled. Thus, you will never be disappointed in this life or the next. So what we're learning here is that service to one's spiritual master is the key to success in spiritual life. And in this story, Krishna said that without the blessings of the spiritual master, no one can be happy. By the mercy of the spiritual master and by his blessings, one can achieve peace and prosperity and be able to fulfill the mission of human life. So we have this reciprocation being brought to light here between, on one hand, the humble service and sincere inquiry from the students, and the blessings and the knowledge being given by the spiritual master. And together, this equates to peace and prosperity and happiness. So let's dig a little bit deeper into how this guru-disciple relationship actually works. I want to emphasize that this is not a mechanical relationship where if I do X amounts of service, I will automatically get Y amounts of blessings. Rather, it is a very personal relationship centered on loving exchanges or on bhakti. The core of the relationship is this humble service and sincere inquiry to a qualified teacher. That's our foundation. And we can see this foundation being expressed even further in a very famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Some of you may be familiar with this. This is Bhagavad Gita 4:34 that says, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshanaha. The translation is, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Again, we can see here coming to light this connection between service and inquiry on one hand, and then receiving blessings and knowledge on the other. This verse just happens to be one of my favorite verses. And the reason is it marked a very significant turning point for me in my spiritual life. I encountered bhakti, I was introduced to bhakti as a teenager in high school. And I was given a few of Srila Prabhupada's small little books, and I had been reading those, and I was chanting the Maha Mantra every day on a regular basis. And after about 6 months of doing that, a devotee actually sent me a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, I didn't have a bhakti community near me at all. I was actually quite isolated. I grew up on a farm in Central Oregon. There wasn't a lot of resources around. There weren't even any yoga studios in the town, none of that at this time. And so I was just really limited to a few books of Srila Prabhupada that I had. And I would sometimes go to the local used bookstores and try to find maybe some used copies of books from Srila Prabhupada as well. So I received this copy of the Bhagavad Gita, and it really blew me away the first time I read it. And when I came across this particular verse, this 434 verse of just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, it resonated so deeply with me. It was like I felt within my heart that I had gone as far as I could on my own in my spiritual life at that point. And I was in need of a teacher. I needed to grow, and I needed a teacher to make that progress. But again, I was completely isolated. The nearest temple was 3 hours away. And again, I was still in high school. And just to date myself a little bit, the internet was just beginning to be a thing at this point. So it wasn't even, I mean, Zoom was totally out of the question. And any sort of resources online was extremely limited. I didn't even own a computer yet. So I wasn't quite sure what to do, but I just started to pray. I wasn't advanced on any level. I was in my very beginning stages, but I can say that they were sincere prayers for guidance and sincere prayers for a teacher. And now I'll tell you what happened next. Some of you who know me know this story, but it's not something I like to share openly everywhere, but in this Sanga, especially this women's Sanga, I'd be happy to share. What happened after this, and this is not long after I started my prayers for a teacher, this is probably within a few days, I had a very potent dream. And I'm not somebody who gets into like dream analysis or anything like that, but it was undeniably potent. In the dream, I was like I appeared in this like desert landscape, completely desolate landscape. And there was this warehouse in front of me. I decided to walk towards the warehouse, and I enter inside. And when I enter inside, it's just busy with people inside. It looked like a convention hall at best. There were a whole bunch, hundreds of folding tables all set up in little booths, and people making deals and people mingling. And if anybody's been to a big conference, it looked like that. Very loud, a lot of noise happening just from people talking to one another. And I was standing in the entryway, taking all of this in, and somebody approached me and he said, "Hi, my name is Ravindra Swarup, and I've been waiting for you." And I was like, "Okay, sure." And he gestured for me to come down the first of the entry steps to another folding table that happens to be in the front there. And he presented a copy of The Science of Self-Realization, which is an actual book, a compilation of some articles from Srila Prabhupada. I had not yet read the book myself, but I had remembered seeing a copy of it. So he pulls this copy out, and in the dream, he goes chapter by chapter and summarizes each chapter for me. And it's a pretty thick book too, so it took some time. And we get to the end of the book, and he asked me, "Do you remember, do you understand what I taught you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you see all these people here?" And he gestured to, everybody around is still running around in this, convention sort of hall atmosphere. I said, "Yes." And he said, "Now I'd like you to teach what I just taught you to all of these people." And then I woke up. Again, this is a very vivid dream, even to this day. This is, many years ago, but to this day, I can still feel that emotion and really see very clearly that experience. After that, I wasn't exactly sure what to do, but the next step that I took was I waited till my family was completely gone from the house. And I snuck into my brother's room because he was the only one with a computer at the time. And I turned on the internet, which in those days was a dial-up AOL connection for some people who might remember those days. And to the best of my ability, I typed in the name Ravindra Swarup Das because I didn't know who this person was. To my memory, I didn't know, I had never met this person, never heard of him before, never read anything of his. And to my shock, and I have to say fright, an image came up, a photo came up of the same person who was in my dream. So intense doesn't quite describe it. It was a very, it wasn't subtle. That's why, because it certainly wasn't subtle. But I was so scared. I mean, honestly, I was just frightened by it because it was so real that I didn't tell anybody about this experience for about 6 months. I just really kept it to myself and I didn't know what to do. About 6 months later, I happened to be in a little correspondence with a devotee from California, and he said, what, you were, chanting and all this stuff. Now, would you ever be thinking of taking initiation? And so through that conversation, I finally revealed what had happened, and he was like, oh, you immediately need to get in touch with him, like there's no question. So by his encouragement, I ended up writing a letter to Ravindranath Prabhu, and about a few weeks later received a response. And I wasn't quite sure even how to word my letter, because I was like, I'm not some crazy, person who's into like dream work and all this stuff. And he just responded. He said, I don't know what your dream means, but I'm willing to help you in whatever way I can in your spiritual life. And that's essentially how I came in contact with my spiritual master. Now, I'm not sharing this to say that finding a spiritual master has to be this dramatic or this esoteric or anything like that. I think for most people it's not, but I'm sharing it to say that in my own experience, it doesn't really matter what your circumstances are. If you're sincere and you're ready for that next step, Krishna will guide you. You have to remember, we're dealing with the most powerful being. Krishna will guide you. He will move mountains in ways that you can't even imagine. You might be sitting here thinking, I don't know how I'm going to meet, my teacher, but those prayers go a long way. And you can't even imagine the things that Krishna can do to put you in contact with the teacher that will help guide you. And it may or may not be subtle, likely not super subtle. So getting back to this verse, okay, so just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Again, this was the verse that impelled me to even go on this journey of finding a spiritual master. And then once I was in touch with him, I still had to figure out how to build this relationship. I lived literally across the country. He resided at the time in Philadelphia. I lived in Oregon. I was just transitioning into college. I didn't have any specific service to do, but I decided to start listening to his classes as attentively as I could. I got in touch with, at the time, again, this is all pre, just downloading something on the internet. So I think it was tapes and transitioned to CDs. And so I started listening to his classes very attentively. Sometimes I would even start transcribing some of the classes just for my own understanding, so I could understand his instructions. It became very clear to me that japa and chanting the Maha Mantra was something of primary importance to him. So I took that as instruction and I made chanting my own priority. And just by following these instructions, again, I'm geographically quite distant at this point. Just by following his instructions, though, I feel this relationship with him beginning to build. It was even simple things like, I'm sure that many of you can relate, whether you're in school or working, there's just some days where it's really hard to find the time to set aside some time for chanting or meditation. And, but I would reflect on, in those moments in my life, I would reflect on those instructions. I knew this was very important to him. So I would somehow or other find the time to maintain the commitment that I had to this meditation and this chanting. And just that thinking of him and his instructions gave me the push that I needed to fulfill the commitment. And I could see that began to form like this connection between my practice and his instructions. I also started corresponding with him about every 6 months just to ask questions from the lectures I had been listening to, and also to give a little update of how I was doing. And this went on for about 4 or 5 years. I hadn't been initiated yet, but this is just how we were building our relationship. Over this time, even despite the distance, I felt a relationship of mutual trust developing. And I'd like to say this is another important point in the guru-disciple relationship. We hear these things of, oh, just surrender to the spiritual master and so on. Practically speaking, and this might be going out on a little limb, but practically speaking, in my experience, I would convey you shouldn't expect yourself to have complete trust and full surrender on day one of meeting somebody. Maybe that will happen, but in my experience, this is something that develops over time. Again, it's a personal relationship, right? So I needed to have that initial faith. I needed to know this is somebody that I wanted to inquire from and to offer some service. And then when I started actually experiencing some of that reciprocation, then I felt I could trust and have even more faith and so on. And over the years, I can say that in my experience, there hasn't really been an upper limit to this increasing of trust and faith in my spiritual master. And I think that is also reciprocated of his trust and faith in me as a disciple. It's a continual process that continues to unfold. Okay. Again, it is this service and sincere inquiry that is this foundation for the guru-disciple relationship. And we could connect that to Krishna and Balaram again in this story. They exemplify this in the relationship with their guru, Sanipani Muni, this service and inquiry, and then a response of blessings. So now I would like to turn back to this Bhagavad Gita verse. I'm going to share this on the screen. And please, one person, we just need one more reader as I share my screen here. We're going to read through the purport to this verse. Again, the verse is just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. And can somebody please read this commentary?
I can read.
Please go ahead.
The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant, without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind toward the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect.
Thank you so much for reading that, Champak. So again, we can see these themes being spoken of, right? So satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret. Here it is. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Why might this be? Because when the spiritual master is satisfied, then he or she naturally wants to reciprocate by giving us blessings and knowledge. And again, I want to come back to this idea. It comes down to a very personal relationship. the spiritual master can reveal more to us because he or she can actually trust us with the knowledge and trust that we will take the process seriously. Not only trust us, but as the commentary says down here, they say, unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master. And when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In other words, without service on the part of the disciple, asking the spiritual master questions will not necessarily be effective. For one point, the disciple might not yet have the qualification or even the humility to understand the knowledge, even if the spiritual master were to answer the question. Also, the teacher may not feel comfortable sharing the knowledge to somebody who is not acting in a humble way to begin with. In my service to my spiritual masters, because I serve in some capacity as an assistant, I've actually seen on many occasions people might ask him for more esoteric knowledge. However, it's clear that this, an individual may not even be following the very basic instructions, the very first instructions that they've been given, but they're asking for more instructions. And I can see that my spiritual master is less inclined to somebody like that to give them even more instructions because they haven't even started with the first one. So why just keep giving knowledge? Sometimes it can serve as a substitution on the disciples' part. It can, asking for more knowledge can serve as a substitution for just actually practicing. Okay. Again, this is a personal relationship involving actual people. Through our service and sincerity, we're showing the spiritual master that we are eager and ready to make spiritual progress. When we do render service, the spiritual master naturally wants to reciprocate. We can experience this in our day-to-day lives. If somebody does something nice for us, we will want to do something nice in return. And I want to come back to Sandipani Muni's example here. I'll stop my share here. When Krishna and Balaram were in danger after collecting firewood in the storm, so they made this sacrifice to go out into a dangerous condition and collect this firewood. Their guru, Sandipani Muni, wasn't only worried when they didn't return. He personally went to the forest himself to find the boys, and I think that's a significant part of the story. He personally went to find them. Can you imagine what that jungle must have been like after such a treacherous storm? It probably wasn't comfortable for the guru either to go out in search of them. He could have just sent some of the other boys out and stayed back at the ashram and waited for their return. But the guru was willing to enter danger and discomfort himself for the sake of his disciples because of that personal relationship and for the sacrifice that they've already done for him. And this was true of the relationship between Srila Prabhupada and his disciples as well. Some of you may have heard of that famous story of Malati Prabhu when she had been serving Srila Prabhupada day and night in really difficult circumstances in India. And in front of his own godbrother, Srila Prabhupada said of Malati, she would slit her throat for me, and I would do the same for her. Now, of course, this is a very intense example, but it shows again this personal relationship of reciprocation based upon loving service and based upon bhakti. I just want to offer a few more points here. I want to offer a disclaimer that this is a healthy state, right? This is not a relationship of exploitation. A qualified spiritual master will live his or her life as disciple of their own spiritual master. They always think of themselves and carry themselves as servants. They're not enjoying or exploiting the devotion of their students. Rather, they are training their students and passing along the service and praise that they receive back to their own spiritual master. And in turn, their own spiritual master does the same, all the way along the lineage of teachers and students, all the way back to Krishna. The closest example we might get to this, aside from just a teacher-student relationship, is maybe a healthy parent-child relationship. When you have a healthy parent, the child can feel at ease and knows that they will be protected. And they don't have to fear that they will be exploited. They are safe, right? And similarly, the parent has a natural desire to teach and protect the child. It becomes, again, this very natural reciprocation. And as trust develops between the guru and the disciple, then a genuine love for one another also develops. And what does this love mean? It's not a transactional relationship or mutual sense gratification. It's not I'll scratch your back, you'll scratch my back sort of thing. Again, it is built around this trust that develops over time. The more that you serve and sincerely inquire, and the more you will experience the reciprocation of blessings and of knowledge, and you'll feel yourself advancing. Jagatarini Mataji, she expressed this, I'm just going to summarize it. She was giving a class last year, and she expressed this mercy coming down from the spiritual master as a feeling like you no longer have to make this spiritual progress purely based on your own hard work, but rather you feel the entire lineage of teachers lifting you up and supporting you. And that is the mercy of the spiritual master that comes in reciprocation for service. When this love and trust is present between a guru and disciple, then you as a disciple are actually willing to undergo sacrifices and even difficulties for the well-being of your guru. And you're happy doing it. That's the funny thing, you actually get joy out of doing that. This is what devotional service is all about. It's actually quite a joy to make efforts to even to go to the temple and set up for festivals. There's this reciprocation of joy that happens. Krishna and Balaram were happy to perform the menial service themselves and even go into dangerous storm to collect firewood out of their love and desire to serve their guru. And in reciprocation, Sandipani Muni not only offered them blessings, but he went into the forest himself personally in search of them out of his love for them. And in my own experience, I can say that there really isn't any greater satisfaction than serving my spiritual master. So any service, of course, will involve some sort of sacrifice. You could be using your time or resources in another way, but instead, if you use them for devotional service, this is a sacrifice, this is service. But it's exactly these sacrifices that lead to deeper, more trusting, and more personal relationships with your spiritual masters and your teachers. And I just like to end with one more quote that I'll just read. This is an excerpt from a short article that Burijan Prabhu wrote after studying and teaching on this story about Sandipani Muni during last year's Govardhan retreat. Some of you may have seen this. I was really struck by what he wrote. This is just the first part of it. It's called The Heart of Education. And he said, what really struck me as I studied Krishna's time with his guru at the Gurukula is how personal Krishna's education was. He lived with a teacher, his guru, Sandipani Muni. There, Krishna naturally underwent hardships to serve and please his teacher. And as a natural reciprocation in return for the student's heartfelt actions, the teacher shared his knowledge, trained him, and offered Krishna his full-hearted blessings. The exchange was neither mechanical nor automatic, but a reciprocation of affection, of bhakti. And this is a taste that pleases Krishna. Education then becomes quite a clear path. The giving of knowledge, the service, the blessings, all simple and sincere and enacted naturally with gratitude and bhakti. So once again, to develop this personal relationship full of trust and love, one can begin with humble service and sincere inquiry. And when one offers this service and sincerely inquires from a qualified spiritual master, the reciprocation of knowledge and blessings will naturally come. And that's my part of the presentation here. Thank you all for allowing me to share. And we'll have some time now for questions. Is that correct? For some breakout room, right?
Breakout room first.
So I composed 3 questions for you to reflect upon. Choose 1, 2, 3, or whichever you like. First question is, what is one thing that struck you about the story of Krishna and Balaram at Sunday Pani Muni's ashram? Just to have a little reflection on that story. What struck you about that? Another question is, reflect on or think of one of your teachers. It could be a spiritual teacher, a school teacher, just somebody, a mentor in your life. How did you develop trust in that teacher or your mentor? And lastly, what is one practical thing that you can do to deepen your service to your spiritual master or to your spiritual community? So any or all of those questions, please feel free. And
Thank you, Shraddha. So I'm gonna put everyone into breakout rooms, and we can discuss amongst each other in the breakout rooms these 3 questions. We'll do that for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and share what we discussed in our groups.
can
Can I ask a question really quick?
There will be time for, is it about the breakout rooms? Because we will have time for question and answers at the end of this session.
Oh, sure. I can wait until the end of the session.
Okay, thank you.
And is it okay for me to stop the share? Do people have the questions in mind here?
I took a photo of it, so other people might want to do something similar while they're still up.
Okay,
Oh yeah, good.
let me know.
They can probably stay up till we go into breakout rooms.
Okay, great.
Maybe while
Oh, there we go.
Oh, that's funny. It's just the 3 of us again. So I hope that everyone else is coming back to the main session.
Yeah, maybe they just got into a discussion. They just very into it too. Actually, I'm like really interested to, because I know Bhakti Center is also holding like in person. I'm actually in New York right now, and I wonder if there's any like in-person location or event holding around.
Yeah. go to bhakticenter.org and click on in-person events. There's a program every Thursday night kirtan. There's a program
Oh.
every Saturday, Soul Talks. And there's also kirtan in Washington Square Park today from 2 to 5 p.m.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but look, yeah, so if you just go to Washington Square Park, you'll see that 2 to 5 p.m. today. And then look up for the other in-person events on the Bhakti Center website.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
But we're back in, thank you. Thank you so much. We're back in the main session now. Sorry we went a few minutes over time there. The discussion was just like really happening. So I felt like we should just be a few minutes late. And so yeah, we have about 5 minutes if anyone wants to share just some reflections from what they discussed in their group.
Maybe I can share something. So I was in this luscious group with Gail and Nina. Nina's in Slovenia, and Gail's, I think, in New Jersey. And so the three questions, Gail was answering the first question about how that personal outreach of the guru was what really struck her, that just personal interest, personal sacrifice, personal. And then Nina went to the third question, what's the one thing we can do to deepen our relationship with the spiritual master? And she was saying that she feels that, just that personal thrust, that personal outreach is what she needs to do, what we need to do. And then I was thinking that, wow, those two contributions really kind of went to the question, the second question about developing trust. And isn't that really the answer? That personal connection, that personal outreach is what develops trust. And yeah, that was really interesting. And then we had this really interesting conversation about developing trust, but how can we develop trust in a tangible way, in a supportive way? And because what we really hanker for that trusting relationship, that personal relationship. And then there's this conversation about going from cooperating. How much time do I have? I don't want to hog. Okay, going from cooperating to liking to loving. So that's all the time I'm going to take. But if you want to talk more, can spell it out more. But yeah, like tolerating or cooperating to liking to loving to developing trust. It was very interesting.
If you want to say more on that, I would love to hear it. I think we all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was on the phone with somebody yesterday, and so he was telling me how, we hear this, that Srila Prabhupada said, your love for me will be demonstrated by how you cooperate together. And so he was saying sometimes we hear this cooperate, like, okay, I'm going to cooperate. I don't really like you, but I'm going to grit my teeth and just cooperate because it's what I'm supposed to do. So this idea of, this personal inquiry, really personal outreach. How can I hear you, see you more deeply? How can I not only cooperate or tolerate, which we were all cringing kind of, but how can I really open my heart to, first of all, like you, and then grow to love you and trust you? It was very interesting. I really appreciated and then one more thing I added, I was just saying, maybe if we were all more childlike, we would have more of a sense of wonder, and our hearts would be more open to like and to be curious and to develop some trust, open-hearted simplicity to trust and to love, growing from tolerating to cooperating to liking to loving and trusting. So that was kind of a summary study. Anyway.
That was really beautiful, Rukmini. Thank you so much. I'm really happy you shared. What
Well,
amazing.
I'm grateful to Nina and to Gail because they were the ones who were really loving and trusting. I was just tolerating. They were tolerating me.
Would anyone else like to share?
I would like to share.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I learned from talking to Sankarpia and Shampaka Lata. Please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing this right. But yeah, I just feel like it's related to what Rukmini just said too. Like sometimes I'm just always trying to use our mind. And because part of this society too is always telling us practical things, how to achieve stuff or how to get certain results by thinking of it or acting a certain way to just take actions. But simplest and most beautiful things might just flow it could be very natural from just a simple like sense of inclusion, like you appreciate your guru and you just fall in love and suppose you fall yourself into it instead of just make up things in very strategic. You're like trying to approach a goal, I suppose. Yeah, you take like small steps. It's just like in relationship too, in romantic way, like uh, sometimes it goes ups and downs, but if you really sense you have that, you start from the sense of willing to connect, and I think you just keep it onto it, things will like always pull you back to that relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Champak, do you want to read the beautiful thing that was put in the chat also?
Yes, so Sachi Priya said that we discussed how trust and relationship is built slowly, but reciprocation is real and small steps are rewarded. I love the example that His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami gave of writing a letter daily to Srila Prabhupada, and he encouraged his disciples to do the same. We can journal, write letters, and make whatever simple offerings we have daily to our spiritual masters, and we will have reciprocation. And Sachi Priya was in my group, and one thing that she also shared is that she doesn't necessarily herself write the letter every day, but knows many people who does, but she's constantly in conversation and praying and talking to her guru. And by doing that, like by telling him everything, and even in the small things, like, oh, I wish Gurudev could see my garden right now. Um, she feels so close to her guru. So really fostering that personal relationship.
That's beautiful.
So now we have, yeah, it's a very practical thing to do to build that relationship. Now we have some time. We have about 13 minutes for questions. If anyone has questions for Sraddahdevi, if you can actually please just, yeah, I think, should we type them into the chat, Rukmini, or just have people unmute themselves?
I don't know, whatever you think. I have whatever you think is best. I have a hungry question for Shraddha, if I can.
Okay, so how about everyone else, just type your question into the chat, and I'll read those questions to Shraddha, and while you all do that, but Rukmini can ask her question to Shraddha.
Thank you. Shraddha, you know, I really, really appreciated your realizations and you know, your personal service. And I feel just really hungry for, you know, you're talking about trust, but also tests and personal experience. So I feel hungry for some anecdotes of so can you share with us some anecdotes of maybe personal tests that you've had in service with your guru, or trust building experiences, or
Yeah.
something that, yeah.
Yeah, I can. What comes to mind initially is when I was living in the ashram of, and I was actually residing in the temple ashram in Philadelphia, and my guru was the temple president. So we had kind of dual relationship in one way, a guru disciple relationship, but also a managerial relationship. And there were definitely times where I wasn't quite sure that the management direction would, I mean, I would do things differently, right? And I may even feel strongly about that. Or I'll leave it at something like that. That came up more than once. And on my end, I had good guidance from other senior practitioners of saying it really is okay to kind of separate out, to tease out those two relationships. It was also a very good learning experience for me, because I was feeling like, oh, do I just have to do whatever he says on a managerial level? Because he's my guru, right? Like, that's the instruction. But what I found is that the more honest I could be with him, the deeper our relationship, even as guru and disciple, became. So if I disagreed with something managerially, I was very welcome, and on his part, I have gratitude. He was very open to me saying, well, are you sure? What about this? What about that? And offering my 2 cents. And yeah, that really built my trust in him. And to recognize that even though we may have disagreements occasionally, that we could come to a resolution. And it wasn't like, oh, well, you just didn't obey me, so therefore you're a bad disciple or something. That he actually cared about my own thoughts and my own well-being in the whole situation.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know, Srila, you're reminding me that Srila Prabhupada also used to like to sometimes kind of spar with certain disciples. And once he said to Shrutakirti, who was his personal servant, he said, "You're no fun to fight with."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, what I learned from all this, like, it's just what I've learned over the years, and I mean, this is probably a very basic thing for many of you, but I have to say, just, growing up in the modern age of I can say I came from a family that had many branches to the family tree in terms of marriages and remarriages and this and that, and I didn't always have the best example of committed relationships over a long course of time. And I can say, just in this instance, it really has been helpful to recognize that although there can be some disagreements or some stumbling blocks along the way, if you just stick with it, it actually goes so much deeper. And then oftentimes those difficult moments end up with the most realizations at the end, and the trust, again, growing from that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question.
I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I don't want to hog the time.
I didn't ask if you have another. There's been no questions into the chat, so Minnie, if you have more questions, please go for it.
Oh, it's just really interesting to me that Sraddahdevi just said that about stumbling blocks, because I was thinking this morning of how this one devotee who was in Germany, he was sort of in Germany preaching all by himself, and he's sort of losing it and falling apart, and he's no longer around actually, but he wrote to Prabhupada that there's so many stumbling blocks in my path, And Prabhupada wrote this beautiful, I mean, you can assume that that's what he wrote from Prabhupada's letter. So Prabhupada wrote to him, he said, I can kick out all stumbling blocks with my foot. Something like that. And it was just so beautiful, you know. So yeah, just the idea of taking refuge and then feeling that trust that the guru, in that trusting relationship, the guru can just take his foot, take her foot, kick out stumbling blocks. You know?
And that requires honesty on our end as well. Honesty with ourselves and a willingness. That's, you know, they say to be humble in front of the spiritual master. It's not this false humility, like, oh, you know, like this on reverence that actually can put up this wall if you take it to an extreme. But it's like this honesty of, you know, here's where I'm at. This is honestly where I'm at right now. I'm not, you know, I have certain doubts. I'm not quite sure if I buy into this whole thing, you know, or I do buy into it, but I'm really not making an investment of my time, or these are the issues that arise from me. And sharing that with your teacher can be so helpful. And just the act of sharing, again, builds that relationship and builds trust. I can say anecdotally of my spiritual master, he has said time and time again, you know, if there's difficulty with one of his students, you know, when a student is going through some difficulty, he's like, why am I always the last person to know? Like so many people, they'll tell their friends, they'll tell this, and oh, but no, I can't go to the guru unless I'm perfect or something. And It's the opposite. It's quite the opposite, that you know, taking on a teacher is not a sign of saying, oh, now I'm advanced and pure in every way. Taking a teacher is basically saying, I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to make progress.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, because it can be so unhealthy to just shove those things down, and rather than to bring them to the light of day, you know, and I think it's you know, they have that word spiritual bypassing, that you know, that we think, oh, this is not Krishna conscious, I have to just chant and be happy, and I have to smile and act like everything's fine, but that's very unhealthy. Yeah, actually, I heard an amazing definition yesterday of humility from our dear Brahmachari Chaitanya Charan, and he said humility means understanding the complexity of relationships and the world and life's complexity and relationships. That's humility. It's very interesting. So I love what you said about bringing those issues to the light of day, and bring them up to inquiry. Beautiful.
Yeah, and that's all a part of the process of, first off, you have to have a little bit of trust that you can open up. But to take that leap and get the feel that response, that's that whole, you know, sincere inquiries and that reciprocation that can come.
Beautiful. What else, Champak? Is there something else in the chat?
Yeah, Andrea says, I find that a lot of times those we look up to as teachers, we don't go to first because we have this story about not bothering them. Forgetting it's an opportunity for us to allow others to serve and for us to be vulnerable. So that's not a question, but if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself. And there is, obviously, there's just like a human quality to it too, of finding the right time and place and manner of which to approach somebody. You don't want to be demanding of like, well, I'm ready now, like, where are you? Like, you know, you want to have some understanding of their needs. And in my experience, the best thing to do is simply to say, I would like to get your guidance, and when would be a good time for you to talk? You know, usually people are completely open if you just take that more humble position of, you know, when would be a good time? It's very simple. But yes, I've been there myself with different mentors of like, oh, I don't want to bother them. And then, you know, the older that I'm getting, the older that everybody's getting, I'm realizing time is limited, try to take advantage of the resources, for sure.
Also, on that note, sometimes we do have a question for our spiritual teacher, and we might not actually have the opportunity to have it answered.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, we could feel bereft of my spiritual teacher didn't answer my question, and I have a need for my spiritual teacher to answer this question for me. And that could even lead us to feelings of even feeling disappointed, right? Of like, I'm not receiving what I need to be able to serve my spiritual master by this question being answered. And we're asked in those moments to actually make our own choice, our own decision. So how would one deal with that kind of situation?
That's a very real situation, because not everybody's going to have a really, easy access to their teacher. That's why it's so helpful to have mentors, local mentors that you can be in touch with, who are in line with your spiritual teacher. That's the first thing I would say. And to use those resources and to build those relationships as well. Another thing is, in my experience, sometimes what we think that we absolutely need an answer to right away, we actually don't need an answer to right away. It might be our own minds getting mental, as we might say. And it's an opportunity for us to grow and actually mature, and to try and reflect on the teachings that we have received and the guidance that we have received, to try to make the best next step for ourselves. And don't discount the power of prayer, and sincerely praying and asking for those realizations to come of what the next best step would be.
Thank you. It's a beautiful answer.
Because that other Chaitya Guru is within the heart. So through patience and prayer, sometimes we can get the answer from that that inner guru.
Yeah.
That.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ji Yunsu says, I relate to that. I do find it hard already to relate deeply with someone physically around in my life.
Thank you.
And does Gail have a comment to make?
Please, Gail. I love to hear from you.
Hare Krishna, everybody. When Mother Rukmini was reading or sharing about this devotee who quoted Srila Prabhupada as having kicked out, some obstacles or stumbling blocks, that was amazing for me, because I think it was just a matter of hours ago, I read a very similar quote from Srila Prabhupada to this disciple of his. Every day there's this chat that shares something that Srila Prabhupada wrote on the particular day. Like if today is the 19th, so they would share what Srila Prabhupada said on the 19th. So this particular one was for September 9th. And let me see if I can share what he said, because it was just like the same what Mother Rukmini read. September 9th said, this is Srila Prabhupada talking to Krishna Das, September 9th, 1972. He said, you mentioned that your pathway has become filled with stumbling blocks, but there are no stumbling blocks. I can kick out all those stumbling blocks immediately, provided you accept my guidance. With one stroke of my kick, I can kick out all stumbling blocks. So that was very similar to what Mother Rukmini had said before. So
Wow,
it reminded me of that, so I thought I'd share it.
beautiful.
Thank you so much, Gail. That was just perfect.
Well, while I'm here, Sraddahdevi, you have no idea how happy I am that you shared your guru's story, because I no,
I know I told you
always,
that story years ago, Gail.
you did? Well, it was like
Yeah.
I heard it for the first time. It was like I heard it for the first time. Totally blew me away, like I heard it for the first time. Because
Well,
I
there you
always tell people that my favorite thing in Krishna consciousness is not even about like loving Krishna. It's about how did I find my spiritual master. That's my favorite thing in Krishna consciousness. And yours, I mean, I've heard so many mystical stories, you know, but yours is definitely like at the top, if not just up there, you know.
Well, it wasn't my doing. That was certainly Krishna
Well,
taking mercy on me
well,
and
yeah, I mean,
on a
that's what makes
farm in
it so
Central Oregon.
interesting. Yeah, that's what made it so interesting. That's what makes it so mystical, because it wasn't your doing, you know. And I mean, I've heard a million stories, because like I said, that's my favorite thing to hear in Krishna consciousness. And you know, and yours is like, oh my God, it's just it's just so amazing and fulfilling to hear that story. Anyway, so I'm so grateful that you shared it.
Thank you. I'm grateful that you're here. It's always a good time to build around.
Thank you so much, Gail. It's really nice to hear from you. I miss hearing your comments in all of the classes at Bhakti Center.
You see, Mother Rukmini, this is what I'm talking about. Feeling, you know, not just tolerated, but liked.
Yeah, well, you know, you're such a personalist. So I think we all need to learn that, you know, how to really be personalists. Because we have all of our reservations that if I open my heart, maybe someone will just kick me with their boots or whatever, you know. So to learn personalism from you, Gail, would be a wonderful gift.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, you all make it easy.
Much, Gail. So I just want to give a few announcements. I put into the chat here the link to join the Urban Devi WhatsApp group. So if anyone would like to join that group, which is where we will also post the recording of today's session for those. A lot of people can't join live, but they do listen to the recording. And that's a private group. And we also do ask that you don't share the recording with others. You just keep it within our group to keep the privacy of, you know, Shraddha really shared from her heart today. So we want to respect her privacy. And our next Urban Devi date is on October 10th from 12 to 1:30. Keep us posted though, because we are looking to change. We'll keep you posted. We are looking to change the time to 11:30 to 1 p.m. starting next month. And the speaker will be Ananda Vrindavan, and the topic is In Search of Peace. And so she's going to be looking at how do we respond in times of difficulty? What do we tell ourselves? And she'll share 6 ways that helped her to find shelter in a recent storm of uncomfortable circumstances. So please join us next month. And thank you all again so much for your association. It's been an absolute joy to be with all of you all today. And thank you so much, Rukmini, for being our beloved host. And thank you so much, Sraddahdevi, for just really sharing from the heart today. I also agree with Gail that it's one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard about someone finding their guru. And I remember you sharing it with me years ago, and it's always stuck out to me as one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard. So thank you so much, and have a beautiful day, everyone.
Champak, I have a question. Should we be noting down 11:30 next month, or you're going to be letting us know? Or
Well, we want to move it to 11:30 to 1, but we just need to double check that's okay with Ananda Vrindavan. because she already committed to the 12 to 1:30. So just once I commit that to her, then I will let her. And we'll post it on the website and the Urban Devi WhatsApp group also.
Yeah, when it gets posted, it'll have the right time.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Vajrani. Thank you, Champak. Thank you so much, Sraddahdevi, dear Sraddahdevi.
Thank you all. This has been a very good experience for me. Thank you.
Your story is kind of like the story in the Bhagavatam of Usha and Aniruddha. The beloved comes in a dream. But I was thinking that Krishna had to really send that dream because he really needed an assistant.
I don't know. It was many years later that I took up the service. So. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
The